A bucket of gray ash should be dead, cold, weightless, and useless. The final remains of something that has already served its purpose. It looks like the end of a process, not the beginning of one, but when you slowly drip water through it, something unexpected happens. The liquid that seeps out the bottom appears harmless at first, cloudy, pale, and forgettable. Then it touches your skin and you feel it immediately. A sharp, bitter sting, like the water is carrying a memory of fire. In that moment, the ash stops feeling dead. It feels active, almost alive, like it is waiting to do something. And in a way it is, because this is where soap begins, not in a factory or a branded bottle, but in the remains of a fire and the leftovers of a meal. What most people never realize is that if you have ever burned wood and cooked food, you have already produced everything required to make soap. The only thing missing is recognition. Modern life trains you to overlook this. It teaches you to see ash as waste and grease as something dirty that should be removed and discarded. But for most of human history, those same materials were not problems. They were ingredients. This is where the Vikings become relevant. Not because they invented soap, but because they challenged the way we think about the past. We tend to imagine them as dirty, chaotic, and indifferent to cleanliness. But archaeological discoveries tell a different story. Combs, tweezers, razors, and ear-cleaning tools appear repeatedly in Viking sites, often carefully crafted and intentionally carried. These were not people ignoring hygiene. They were maintaining it even in harsh environments. That contradiction forces a deeper question. Why would a people living in cold, resource-scarce conditions invest time in grooming? The answer is that cleanliness was not a luxury for them. It was part of a larger system. To understand that system, you have to start with fire. When hardwood burns completely, what remains is not just ash, but a concentrated collection of minerals and compounds. This gray powder looks insignificant, but it holds chemical potential. When you place that ash into a crude container, a hollow log, a bucket, or any simple filter, and pour water through it slowly, the water begins to extract those compounds. Drip by drip, the liquid that emerges is no longer just water. It has been transformed into a crude alkaline solution known as lye. This lye is unpredictable. Sometimes it is weak, barely effective. Other times it is strong enough to burn skin or damage materials. It is not refined, not stable, and certainly not safe in the way modern products are designed to be. But it is powerful, and more importantly, it is only half of the process. The other half is something equally overlooked: grease. In modern kitchens, grease is treated as a nuisance, something to wipe away or dissolve with store-bought cleaners, but historically, grease was valuable. It was stored, saved, and reused because it contained energy and potential. When you heat that grease and allow it to melt into a workable state, you create the second essential component. When these two substances, lye and fat, are combined carefully, something subtle but significant begins to happen. At first, it looks like nothing more than a messy mixture, two incompatible materials forced together. But gradually, the texture changes. The mixture thickens, stabilizes, and transforms into something new. This is the process known as saponification, though the name matters far less than the outcome. What emerges is a substance with a unique property. One part of it binds to oil, while another part binds to water. That dual nature allows it to do something water alone cannot: remove grease, dirt, and grime effectively. This is soap. But focusing only on the final product misses the deeper insight. The real breakthrough is not the soap itself. It is the system that produces it. Nothing in this process requires a store, a factory, or a supply chain. Everything comes from ordinary life. Heating your home produces ash. Cooking your food produces grease. Saving both allows those leftovers to be transformed into something useful again. The same materials that seem like waste become tools for maintaining cleanliness, which in turn supports the very system that created them. It is a loop, one that continuously feeds itself. This is what making soap forever actually means. It does not imply infinite production without effort. Instead, it means that as long as life continues, burning fuel, cooking food, generating byproducts, the ingredients for soap will keep reappearing. They are embedded in daily survival, not dependent on external systems. Modern life, by contrast, separates everything. Heat, food, cleaning, and waste disposal are all treated as independent systems, each with its own infrastructure and industry. This separation creates convenience, but it also creates dependence. In older systems, these functions overlapped. The hearth was not just a source of warmth, it was a central engine that produced multiple outputs. It heated the home, cooked the food, created ash, and indirectly enabled the production of soap. This compression of functions made the system efficient and resilient. That resilience becomes especially important in harsh environments. In a northern winter where cold is constant and resources are limited, nothing can be wasted. Animals are slaughtered at specific times to preserve meat. Fat is rendered because it contains essential calories. Fire burns continuously because survival depends on it. Ash accumulates naturally as a byproduct. In such conditions, soap is not a luxury or an optional craft. It is a byproduct of living correctly within the system. However, this process was far from easy or pleasant. Rendering fat produces strong, unpleasant odors that linger in the air. Lye is caustic and can cause serious injury if handled improperly. The balance between the two ingredients is difficult to achieve, and mistakes can lead to ineffective or harmful results. Too little lye leaves the mixture greasy, while too much can make it harsh enough to damage skin. Each batch requires experience, judgment, and adaptation. This difficulty is precisely why the method endured. Practices that survive for centuries are not necessarily the most elegant or comfortable. They are the ones that remain useful under pressure. They are repeatedly relearned because they solve real problems. At the heart of this system lies a small but profound shift in perspective. At some point, someone looked at ash and chose not to see it as useless. Instead of discarding it, they experimented. They poured water through it, observed the results, and discovered its potential. That moment represents more than a chemical discovery. It represents a different way of thinking about the world. It is a rejection of the idea that something has no value simply because its purpose is not immediately obvious. It is an understanding that materials can have multiple roles depending on how they are used. This mindset, seeing potential where others see waste, is what made systems like this possible. Over time, that mindset has become less common. Modern systems provide finished products without exposing the processes behind them. Soap is something purchased, not something understood. The connection between raw materials and final outcomes becomes invisible. As a result, people can use products daily without ever considering how they are made or where they come from. This shift has consequences. When knowledge of processes disappears, so does the ability to recreate them. Dependence increases and resilience decreases. If the only way to obtain soap is through a store, then access to cleanliness becomes tied to the stability of that store and the systems supporting it. In contrast, understanding the relationship between ash, water, and fat creates a different kind of independence. It does not eliminate difficulty, but it provides options. It allows for adaptation when external systems fail or become unavailable. The distinction here is not simply between modern and ancient ways of living. It is between understanding systems and relying on them without understanding. Ancient people did not have formal scientific language, but they had direct interaction with materials and processes. They learned through repetition, observation, and necessity. Knowledge was embedded in practice rather than theory. The Vikings, in particular, illustrate this point because they challenge common assumptions. They are often portrayed as primitive, yet they maintained tools and practices that required awareness and intention. They operated within systems that modern perspectives often overlook. Recognizing this does not mean rejecting modern advancements. It means understanding that sophistication does not always appear in the form of advanced technology. Sometimes it appears in simple, integrated systems that maximize the use of available resources. Ultimately, the idea of a $0 soap trick is not about the specific steps involved in making soap. It is about a broader perspective on how resources are viewed and used. Ash is not merely waste, and fat is not merely residue. Both are part of a larger cycle in which materials flow from one function to another. When you begin to see the world in terms of these relationships, the concept of waste changes. Instead of asking what needs to be discarded, the question becomes what can be transformed. This shift in thinking reveals opportunities that would otherwise remain hidden. Even after a fire burns out and a meal is finished, something remains. The ash sits quietly, often ignored, appearing to have no further purpose. Yet within that gray residue lies the potential for the next step in the cycle. It is not an end, but a transition, and that is the real insight behind the idea of making soap forever. It is not about endless production, but about recognizing that the materials needed for essential functions are often already present. They are simply waiting to be understood and used differently.